You're tuning in to Neurodiversity, a podcast for neurodivergent adults and the people who love them. Please note that this podcast does not substitute medical or professional diagnosis and advice.
What's up, y'all? Happy 2024. It's been a little minute since I dropped the last episode. So, for all of y'all who have been listening since day one and who have been requesting more episodes, thank you. Thank you for believing in me and for encouraging me to keep going. There's definitely been bumps along the road in figuring out how I want to set up my workflow and how I want to just represent, I guess, first and foremost myself, but also my neurodivergent community and the mental health community. I've had some clarity. We're back. This is season 2. Thank you for being here. And so with the restructure, before I was kind of like just ping-ponging and saying whatever, recording topics that were just on my mind, and my ADHD brain's like here, there, everywhere, that sort of thing. But what I've decided on is to go ahead and we're going to go by topics to give it some organization. And the first topic I want to start with is work. And real quick before I jump into much more, please, if you appreciate this work, if you like this labor of love, please share it. Please please subscribe. I'm really trying to do some numbers here, y'all. So please help me do that. As what I want, I'm going to go ahead and put this out there, is the year of 2024 is going to be the year where 95% of my income will come directly through therapy with Jasany, from clinical therapy to other offerings for the neurodivergent community and trauma-impacted communities. So 2024 is the year where, the cash will be flowing. I will be making a living wage. And it will not bounce through a third party. Okay? Ashe, ashe. All right. So anyway, I I've decided to go ahead and do topics for each season. So we are going to focus on work for this season, and I wanted to start off with work because when I came to the realization of my own neurodivergence, there were a number of things that really made it click for me. I'm like, oh, I think they're talking about me here. But one of the big topics was work. I have struggled with work since I've started working. Most of my jobs haven't been longer than a year, especially graduate school, and even a few afterwards. They really just kind of gave it about a year and a couple of months. There's been a couple of jobs since I've been in private practice, and obviously owning my own practice now, where I've had some longevity, and a lot of that is because of, I guess I'm going to say, the privilege that I have, and I'm going to say the privilege based on the current workplace society and structure that we have. A typical 80 hours. Woo, though some of y'all are probably working 80 hours to survive. But that typical 40-hour a week structure. Things look a lot different from me. I'm working from home, but we'll get into that when we get there. So let's just get it started. I think in this episode, I'm going to start talking about my first job, and we'll go from there and see if I add in a couple more or if I break it up into episodes. So I started working when I was 16. I was thirsty to get a job, and likely because of my socioeconomic status. So I went out, got a job at 16. My first job was working at a shoe store company, a popular shoe store company that sold sneakers, right? And so with that, out of the jobs I've had, it wasn't so bad. There was a little bit of awkwardness socially, but nothing too crazy, nothing that I wasn't used to or kind of thought was my norm. So it was a pretty small store. And I had about probably 4 or 5 coworkers and my manager, right? And all of the coworkers, they were probably about 18 to like 22 or something like that while I was 16. So I was the youngest one there. And so I get this job. I know nothing about shoes, nothing at all. Particularly sneakers, right? I was like into Vans. So, I get this job, and when I do, which you'll see a theme here in all of my job experiences, is I start to study the material of the job. And like, I don't mean like, "Hey, what's that shoe?" and I make a mental note of it. I mean like legitimate research. Like I'm making study guides and I'm learning what like retro floors are, which I no longer remember because that's kind of how my brain works. um, I know all about the Air Max and which ones are cool. I'm learning about sizing. Literally like doing research like at home, studying them, and then like going into the store and like testing myself to see like if I know what shoe is what shoe, that sort of thing. Um, so I got pretty good at what I did, but of course there was some struggles there, and so some of that came socially. I definitely had greater social challenges at work, but with this one, it was like I would never really be a part of the group. Okay, and all my coworkers were black, and I want to say that because I grew up around a lot of white people. So from playing soccer to being in church, there's a lot of white people in my life, Girl Scouts, things like that. And while there were also black people in my life, like I learned really early on that like white was right. At least that's what I thought, and that's what I wanted to be. And that's a whole other story for another day. But I grew up with a lot of like anti-blackness, and oftentimes I didn't really get along with my black peers, and it was usually because like they would say I was, talking white or whatever. I had awkward interests as I still do. um, so yeah, like I would never really be included like in the group combos that they would have at the register or whatever. And I would never like be invited out or anything like that. It didn't bother me, but I did notice. And part of that, like not getting invited out, I don't know if that really had to do with my neurodivergence is so much my age as everyone else was technically an adult. Um, but yeah, but with everyone who worked there, like, I mean, I was friendly with everybody, and we would have like little one-on-one conversations, and yeah, it was cool. It wasn't too bad, right? Um, I'm trying to think here to see. Yeah, I was pretty much I'm looking at my notes and like I was pretty much just like staying busy throughout the day, like finding something to clean. Again, studying the shoes because there's a lot of freaking shoes. Um, and like in the neurodivergent community, like oftentimes like you're really good at things and then like you're really bad at certain things. Um, and so like one thing that I'm bad at is like doing things for metrics, and largely because like I have never really, well, I didn't before understand or knew that it exists, and now I don't agree with the system of capitalism, right? So, like in this job, we had to sell accessories. So, you want to get points for selling shoestrings, you want to shoe cleaner, you want to open up cards for the store, that sort of thing. And like, I just was never interested in that. I'm just like, people come here to buy shoes, and I'm gonna help them buy shoes and be really knowledgeable about that. And if they want to buy something else, sure, but like I'm not about to breathe down strangers' necks to like buy some things I don't need so that your like report can look good because I don't care. um so that was always like a little struggle or like some things that I would um just kind of get reprimanded on, right? Um, so another thing that I think was particularly interesting at that job, was that one of my coworkers, who I was like a little closer to, like he had to give me a little bit of a life lesson and teach me some social norms. So I'm just gonna go ahead and like put this out there. I think I mentioned it in one of the videos in the past. Um, or not the videos, because before I was doing audio, but one of the episodes in the past. So at the time, yeah, I was 16. I had a boyfriend, we were madly in love. I thought I would never date anyone else. All that great stuff, right? And so like I was sexually active at the time, and I found out about neck kisses, and whoo, my God, that was my jam. I was all about it. I was all about it. And so consequently, like I would have hickeys. And when I think about this now, like I live with my dad and I don't know if he noticed or he just didn't notice because he never said anything to me about it. But my coworker at the time like pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, like you don't want to like come to work like that or like show that or whatever, whatever." And I was like, "Oh, really? Wait, word?" Because like to me, I was just like, I wasn't ashamed. Like, I'm getting it in. Like, I love that man. That's my man, my man, my man. He loved me back. And what's it to you? Like, I'm having a good time. So yeah, he told me that that wasn't very appropriate, and I learned that I should cover up those hickeys or get them in places that aren't super visible. Um, so that was my first job. I think that was like the gist of it. Well, here is the banger of it all. So my like devout by the book loyal I want to say consumer, but it's the opposite of that loyal employee having himself. Like I was doing inventory, right? And so like I come across these boxes and there's no shoes in them. There were like several boxes. Like they had like dominoes in some of them or like VHS tapes and things like that. And I'm just like, what the heck is going on? And then like ding ding ding. I'm like, oh, like somebody stole something. And so you know me, like I've been a rule follower for most of my life. I've become more deviant as I've gotten older, but most rules I'll follow unless I just think they're dumb. So I I went and told my manager, right, about, the stuff that was going on. Oh my God, crazy. And then what happened, I shit you not, like I stopped being put on the schedule. And so like he told me that like he didn't have as many hours to give, blah 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 blah. So like I think like 2 or 3 weeks went by and like just nothing. I wasn't on the schedule. And so, like, one thing about me, like, while I might be kind, I might be sweet, I might be empathetic, don't play with me. Like, because I'm not having it. So, like, I called, like, the corporate of the company and I'm like, why am I not getting any hours? Like, my manager won't put me on the schedule anymore, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, you don't work for us. And I'm just like, what do you mean I don't work for you? Like, I've been working, blah, 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 blah. So they looked into it. And this man fired me because I was snitching, which I mean, I get it in retrospect. Like, what else was he going to do? But like, he had the wrong one, or I guess the right one that day. So they ended up actually transferring me to a sister store or whatever. And he got fired. So that was interesting. But yeah, so that was job number one. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and get into job number two. My first job wasn't that bad. All in all, it was pretty cool. In fact, most of my jobs pre-college were pretty cool, which I only had two. So here's the second one. The second one I worked at a pizzeria. Um, and I love this job. Like actually to date, this is probably like my favorite job. Like if I could pick pizza for a living wage, like I'd probably still be there. um, really enjoyed it, but it did take me some time to warm up. And so this was more of the social difficulty. And like when I think about it, comparing this job to my second job, I'm sorry, this job to my first job, it makes me wonder like what created the social difficulty because at the first job I didn't feel like I really had that. Again, like I wasn't really in groups, but that's been my norm throughout life. Like it's hard for me to like interject in group conversations or know who to look at or when to look at other people and yeah, it's like when it's my turn or remembering what I have to say. So like those are things I kind of like shy away from groups a lot of times. Still to this day, like I mean, I will hang out in group settings, but I prefer to really hang out in like one-on-one, one-on-two, maybe three, that sort of thing. So I think that maybe that shift. There were a lot more people at the pizza place that I worked at, and the lighting too. The lighting was a lot brighter, and I was in really close proximity. So I made pizzas. I worked on the line and as a cook, and so like I would be in line with other cooks. I'm trying to think when you see this, like what direction is left or right. I don't know if it's the same, but nonetheless. So I'm like standing next to like 2 to 3 other people on the line, and we're right next to each other, and so they're strangers. I don't know them. basically, the way it started was I just didn't talk. Like, I was pretty much mute at work for a while, and sometimes people would talk to me, and I might, like, nod or, like, say a word or two, but, like, I wouldn't really engage in any conversation, and, like, we were allowed to wear headphones, so a lot of times I would have my headphones in, and I really only ask questions about work. So, like, "What does this pizza get?" Or, like, "How much of this?" Or, "Where's a backup for that thing?" That sort of thing. Um, and so that's it's really interesting because, like, in my brain, the way I thought about it, and I feel like I've been like this for the most part throughout my working, um, ages. Work is work and outside of work is not work. So, like, I don't go to work to make friends. I think, like, friends are separate from work. Or another example, like, in my dancing, and again, like, I started dancing consistently pretty much at age 30, 29. Um, and when I would go to classes, it would just kind of be, I don't know if the word's jarring, but it would kind of, like, I would just be taken aback a little, like, when people would try to, like, talk to me, or, like, they would try to have conversations and stuff, and I'm like, I didn't come to socialize, like, I came to dance, to work out. So that's something I had to learn. It's like, "Oh, this is also, like, a social environment." And, yeah, that the I really realized, more recently, like in 2021, maybe 2022, when I listened to What to Say Next. It's by, I believe, Sarah and Larry Nannery. I think I might have mentioned it in the previous episode. Uh, that's when I really understood the idea of social currency. And again, like, I was, in my 30s or early 30s, and I didn't really understand that before. Hierarchical structures. I typically thought were just silly and nonsense or whatever, or just like, okay, well, yeah, seniority, you worked here longer, you might know a little bit more, but, like, I don't necessarily, like, hold you to a higher esteem, you know? Um, and so that's something that I had to learn, that most people don't operate that way, right? Um, so I was like, I'm at work, like, why would I be talking to these people? Like, especially, like, we stand right next to each other all day. That's a lot of talking. But the people I worked with were super cool, and I actually did warm up to them and became pretty cool friends with them for a little while. And yeah, like, it was a good time, and I really enjoyed making the pizzas. And I think, like, one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was that I was able to gamify the job. So gamifying tasks is something that I've always done naturally, and I've, learned through my journey that that's something that's intervention that you want to use for neurodivergent folks, particularly children, but possibly also adults. So even when I was really young at home, like, I started washing dishes pretty early. I think my parents had me at the sink by, like, 6. Like, I would gamify that, and so I would, I would be like a little announcer and, like, announce, like, who would, like, what, like, dish was going into the water and things like that. Similarly, on maybe a little bit of a disgusting note, when I would have to, like, shower and get ready in the morning, I would gamify that too. And so, like, kind of like, Lunette from the Big Comfy Couch. You know how she does, like, the 10-second tidy? So I would always try to do, like, the 10-second wash up, and I would try to see, like, if I could get faster and faster and just, like, really pits tits, naughty bits. I didn't even know that saying at the time, but I would be, like, try to get in, try to get out, and, like, beat my score even though I wasn't technically keeping time. So I would gamify things. So, like, here at Laura Brosa's, or I said I wasn't gonna say the names of these companies, but I didn't say nothing negative, so I think this one will be okay. But yeah, when I was working with this pizza place, like, I would gamify it, and so I would try to, like, get the pizzas done really fast and get them in the oven. But what I really loved was being on the opposite side of the oven and boxing the pizza, especially during prime time, because you're just like, there's like two ovens. It would be one on top, one on the bottom, and they would both be full. And you just have pizzas coming at you, at you, at you, at you, at you. And I would be in there, I would be flicking a wrist, like flipping in the pan on cut, bam, 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 bam. And, like, there was, like, this little certain motion that you made, kinda like a star to get it all cut, and, like, I would do that fast and, like, stack them and stack more, and, like, if I needed more boxes, I would scream for boxes, and, like, I loved it. I love the thrill, I love the rush, I love the urgency. Um, And that was one of my favorite parts of the job. That and like creating my own dishes because we would get a free shift meal, and so I would make my own pizzas and calzones and stuff. I used to make one with like this Diablo sauce. It was lovely, lovely. But yeah, okay, that was my second job post or pre college. So again, please like, subscribe, share, and please tune in to the next episode as I keep going through my work journey and how progressively it got worse. And actually, with the higher level of education I've got, the worse it has gotten. Which you would probably think that there would be like an inverse correlation there, like, oh, like you're older, you're wiser, like you get it more, but no, it definitely led to my autistic burnout that I've already discussed. So yeah, I would love to hear from y'all in the comments on Spotify. There will be a poll. Tell me a bit about like your first job, either your first job or just a job you had, let's say in high school as a child. Like, what was it like for you um, working as a teen and getting into the workforce? All right, I'll catch you next time. Peace.